Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio, podcast, and television show. I'm your host, Life Coach Renee Young, and sitting in the guest chair today is Karen Johnson. Karen is the author of Living Grieving, and I have my copy here. Yes, and we're going to be talking about today is how we can grieve while living. And I'm so excited to talk to Karen. I read her book. It's a powerful book. It's a powerful story. And I couldn't wait to talk to her. Like I was just telling her, I came here 2 hours early for the interview. So I'm hoping that you guys will stick around because this is powerful. So welcome, Karen.
Oh, thank you. And I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes. Okay, awesome. I'm very thrilled to have you here. All right. So let me set this up by giving you a short bio on Karen. Karen V. Johnson, fast-paced professional career as a federal judge came to an abrupt halt when she lost her 27-year-old son, Ben, to a harrowing overdose. Rather than grieve in a way that made people around her comfortable, she did the unexpected. She quit her lifelong appointment career, sold her house with all her belongings, and went on a 2.5-year journey around the world, finding a spiritual and healing practice along the way. Karen didn't think that she would ever find her way out of despair, but she found a process that works and share her journey of transformation with others so they can heal too. Her work is structured around the shamanic practices of mindfulness and the journey of the 4 winds medicine wheel. Karen blends her personal story with meaningful experiences, offering exercises related to each of the 4 practices of becoming unstuck, becoming lighter, awakening, and creating a new life. So that's the lead-in to our conversation today. But like I said, I have a copy of her book, and thank you so much, Karen, for sending me a copy of your book. And I feel such empathy with you for your loss and for the love that you have for your son. You know, the story just jumps off the page. And because of that, I really wanted to talk to you because it opened up a lot of questions for me. So I was, and I read your book before I go to bed at night. And so it's great. So, all right. So I want to start off by asking you to share with the listeners your grief journey of the death of your son from a harrowing overdose. It's a powerful story. So, share with those listening how that came about.
Ben, my son Ben, so 27 years old, and he was struggling, as many young men are, trying to find himself, trying to decide if he's going to try to start a business, go back to school, many things. And so I was going on a vacation to South Korea for a week, and I thought to myself, well, when I get back, we're going to have the big conversation. I don't care how uncomfortable it is, the ones we always avoid and say, well, maybe later. And so I went to South Korea, and one day in the afternoon, I just wasn't feeling well, and into the evening. And then all of a sudden I get this call and they hang up. And so I just had this feeling that this is not good. And so I called the number, and a detective answers. And I say, did you just call me? I'm Karen Johnson. He said, yes. Where are you? And I said, well, I'm in South Korea. And he said, okay, well, I have some bad news for you. I'm like, what? Did my son have an accident? What happened? I'm sorry, but he's dead. What? From what? Heroin overdose. What? So he wasn't, at least in my mind, or maybe I don't know all the details, but he wasn't a big user. And I had the ME look, and there weren't needle tracks anywhere, just the one that killed him. But so he had gone to a party with some other young guys, and they got drunk, and they decided, hey, we're going to try heroin in all their 27-year-old wisdom, right? Only for him, he was 6'8" and 200 and some 60 pounds, and they gave him too much, and he died almost instantly. And he and I were very close, and it just rocked my world. So they say that the death of a child and an unexpected death are the two worst ones to survive. So when you have an unexpected death of a child, you're in a bad place.
Yeah.
So that's the bad part of it. The other side of it is, it's always the blessing and the curse, the yin and the yang. So the other side of it was, so the next morning, I couldn't even get out of South Korea. It was nighttime when I got the call, and day is night, night is day. I couldn't get a flight until the next morning. So I was sitting in the airport in South Korea, and I see Ben.
That's my most favorite part of the book, by the way. And I was going to ask you that question.
Yeah.
So it's my most favorite part. Well, yeah. Anyway, tell it. Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to hear what other questions you're going to ask. I'm excited about your questions. This is great. So, so I'm sitting in my chair and I see Ben in front of me, just like he is in life. And he's smiling his big old grin, and then he fades away. So I desperately, frantically call my ex-husband, his father, and say, you got to check. I think he's alive. I think he's in that refrigerator and he's trying to get out. I think he's alive. You got to go. And so he calls the ME, who very kindly looks and says, no, I'm sorry, he's gone. But that for me was a doorway. Death is always a doorway. Death was a doorway into believing in life after death. And it's something that I did not believe in before. I didn't have much of a spiritual practice. I couldn't figure out how we could just believe one way was right and all the other ways were wrong. And so I just sort of wrote it all off, I think. And if I would have said something, I would have said, alive is alive, dead is dead. That's all there is. And so my son, Benjamin, woke me up to life on the other side, as he continues to do and has continued to do.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the reasons that I wanted to speak to you. I'm wearing a sweater right now, but I'm getting chills, even though I have the book beside me every night and I read a little part of it. But it is such a blessing for anyone that has experienced loss to know that. Now, I'm going to, shoot ahead a little bit, but you said that was the first time that Ben appeared to you in his human form. And of course, we're going to get into the fact that he was with you in other forms. And in fact, I was looking at the cover of your book a few minutes ago, and I noticed that the cover, the picture that you have on here is like a bird or a hawk, right?
Yeah.
Because you said that you used the word flapped around, like if he was flapping around in other forms, all the time. So, so in your experiences, you mentioned that it was a blessing to open the door, even though his death was, rocked your world. And for a long time too, that you had a doorway. And I know that at one point in time, you were able to feel his energy, like you felt that he was in distress. And I heard, since I started reading your book, I follow Sadhguru, and he talks a lot about life or death. And he said that whenever you die suddenly from like suicide or, a bullet or maybe like a heroin overdose or something, then your spirit is, it can't seem to find peace. So can you tell us about that? Because I'm really interested in before we go on to the cure, how that came about for you as far as learning about the other side.
Yeah. So after he passed, so much happened in that week. And then we could have a whole conversation about funerals and funeral directors and how they can be very insensitive. But one thing that I could feel him as people left, and I was by myself in the house. I was in this state. I was so distraught that my bedroom was upstairs. I couldn't get up the steps. So I would be on the steps and I would be crying and screaming for Ben and screaming until I threw up and threw up until I was throwing up blood. So I was a mess. I mean, I was truly a mess. And I could feel him around me. I knew that he was around me, just frantic, but I couldn't hear what he was saying.
What's up, y'all? I'm Percy Miller, Master P. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or simply have a product or service that you sell, then listen up. If you have under 20 employees and suffer a reduction in your income due to the pandemic, then you are eligible to receive $5,000 in marketing assistance. To boost your business with Westwood Marketing Group. To get started, text the word pandemic, PANDEMIC, to 833-942-5960.
And so, although I could sense him, I couldn't hear him. So I did what my logical mind would never have done before. I opened the phone, or the computer. Phone books are out, so I'm dating myself. Open Google, Mr. Google, and looked up mediums. And so mediums in Fairfax County, Virginia, and this whole page popped up. And this is all new to me too, because I, in my little world, never came across anybody who was a medium or doing a lot of spiritual stuff. It just wasn't my world. And so one person's picture looked a little bit larger than the others. And I thought, well, I'll take that one. And turns out this is a way Spirit has been guiding me now to buy a house, to do many things. Something looks different. And that's how Spirit communicates, because, we don't always hear the words. We can't always translate what Spirit's saying. And so I went there, and it was about 3 weeks after he passed. And I said, look, he came in right behind me. He's standing right there in the corner. See him? He's shaking the candle. See the candle there? He's shaking. He's shaking the candle, let you know he's there. Can you tell me what he's saying? I can't hear him.
Wow.
And so we had a wonderful session, and she told me things that really resonated because it sounded like him.
Okay.
Something like, Mom, it is what it is. It was a boneheaded move. And things like that just sounded like him. And so after it was all finished, she said, you might have some abilities yourself, because most of my clients have no idea that their loved one is right there or any of that. And so that was sort of the intro, because for me to begin studying mediumship and spirituality, and really, I just wanted to talk to my son. And, that was my motivation at that moment. But it led me in the right path to the right people that directed me deeper and deeper into spiritual things that I had no knowledge of before.
Yeah, I think you said that you were clairsentient, right? Was that the right one?
Yep.
Because there's clairvoyant and clairsentient, and clairsentient is the feeling one. So
the feeling, sensing one. Yep.
Right. So what she said was that what the medium said is, like, spirits are there, but a lot of us can't feel them. Right. Did she tell you what? I know the other thing I heard, that one of the reasons that we can't feel spirits is because when you die, your energy is at a higher frequency, and somebody has to lower their frequency in order for us to sense them. Is that true?
That's my experience. It's sort of like when you go to a Buddhist temple, or you go into the Catholic church, or any church, there's hymns, there's singing, there's smoke, there's all this. And it's all a way of changing the vibration. And when you walk into a sacred spot, it has that different feeling. And it makes it easier, in my perception, for spirits to come down in this realm.
All right. So I think, from your book, you said that he was frank, with always flapping around. And then I think you said that he calmed down. Yeah. So did he calm down? He was flapping around because he wanted to talk to you or communicate with you, or let you hear what he was saying. And then after you kind of established a conversation with the medium, he calmed down, or was, this is a deep question, but I know you know it because you've studied it. Or did he calm down because the energy that was left from the sudden death started to dissipate?
That's a good question. I think it's a little of both. And I think it couldn't dissipate until he was able to reassure me, because my being frantic, and if you sign it, people that sign into my website, they get 8 things spirits on the other side wish you knew. And so one of the things that they wish you knew is that as you stay stuck and in trauma, it prevents them from fully moving on and doing what they need to do on the other side.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they are watching, they're seeing, and people say, well, if they go to heaven or, nirvana or wherever you think that place is, how can they come back? And then they say, well, it's not prison. So they're allowed to come back and forth, right? And
Okay.
sometimes they come back and forth easily, and sometimes they're a little stuck in between worlds and they
Yeah.
need a little help.
Okay.
Mhm,
So the answer to the question, you're saying that as you calm down, that you
mhm.
know that he was okay, and he said it was a bonehead decision, and he said it's all right, then his energy became to dissipate. So this was how long ago now to date, dating back?
7 years.
7 years. That's a
Mhm,
good, nice number. So I
mhm.
think you said in the book that you started to see him less and less. But but before we started recording, you said that you could feel his presence. So is he still a part of your world,
Oh yeah, for
spirit
sure.
form?
Yeah. So, I became a shaman. I do shamanic healing. Part of shamanic healing is helping people to die and helping spirits cross over in the other world. I do a lot of that kind of work. And so Ben will help me. I'll call him if I have a young
Wow.
person who's committed suicide or sudden death or something. That sometimes suicides get a little stuck because there's so much bad talk about suicides, that they're going to hell and all this kind of stuff. And so they're a little
Mm,
scared. They don't know what to be. So I can call Ben and he'll say, hey man, come with me. I'll show you the ropes. I'll show you it's beautiful on the other side. You have nothing to fear. And then they're
wow.
able to cross peacefully. So we,
Wow.
we kind of work together on things like that. Hmm.
Absolutely incredible story. All right. Now let's circle back to him appearing in human form only once. Why do you think that is?
I think it's very hard for spirits to appear in as their physical form. I think that's hard to hold that. And so mostly we just feel them as energy, or we get a sense of them, a smell of them, a feel of their presence, but not that physical appearance. I think he could do that maybe one time.
Oh,
It seems
and then
like,
the energy leaves. Right.
yeah. And then it's kind of, yeah, they become more ethereal as time goes on.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I think I've
Mhm.
answered all my spiritual questions that I had.
Ah, okay.
All right. One last one for the listeners. So we're talking about life after death. Um, and so if you were gonna, people have lost a lot of people over, the pandemic, and I've had some people, some interviews on, wife losing spouses. I've actually never had one with a mother losing a son, but the grief is profound.
Yeah.
So what kind of solace can we have, um, as far as missing our loved ones or feeling their presence? Should we be scared when we feel their presence, or, what kind of advice you can give on that?
Yeah. So I think sometimes people say, oh, I love to see my loved one, but I find it scary at the same time. I really don't want them appearing. So if you have that kind of dynamic going on, I think they don't appear. Right. And so a lot of times we're scared. I mean, I don't think before I saw Ben, he just kind of showed up. If I'd have thought about it, I probably would have said, oh, I don't know about that. That sounds like, a little scary.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that goes on, and it depends, it just depends how they show themselves to you. They try to show themselves in a way that you can comprehend, that isn't going to be too much. Maybe a
Mm.
butterfly, maybe a touch, maybe a bird, maybe wind chimes. One man said he told his dad, now, whenever you pass, I want you to ring the wind chimes when you're around. And so the wind isn't blowing and the wind chimes will ring. So I think we can get them to do things that they can do. Mhm.
Okay, so that's awesome. So we should all feel comforted that, that they're in a better place,
Mhm.
and that they're okay, and that they're still there. Sometimes they become our angels, and they're
Mhm.
watching over. And if they do show up, there's nothing to be scared of. Now, when they show up, what is the purpose of them showing up? Is there because they want to be with you? They want to try to talk to you? Or what was the purpose of Ben showing up to you?
For him, I think he wanted to let me know that he was all right, because I was suffering so greatly. Like, is he okay? And where is he? And is he upset? And, did he die missing? Did he call for his mom? And I wasn't there. And, all the grief and shame, blame, shame, blame, guilt, that triangle, we can all get stuck in there in our grieving, because we're not totally rational. And we think we think we had control. And if we had done this differently or that differently, if I hadn't gone to Korea, if I hadn't done that, if I had just been there, this wouldn't have happened. Not true. It's not true and it's not real, but our mind creates these stories that make us suffer. And so I think he came to help me be able to not suffer, to let go of some of these stories. And other spirits might come, they might have a message and say, want to tell somebody, hey, the life insurance policy I hid under the drawer, there could be all kinds of reasons.
I've actually heard that one. I've heard that one, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Or they just want to come by to a child that's grieving so much and just let them know and have that feeling of, that presence of that spirit, that father spirit, that mother spirit. So sometimes they just want to be there for us in the best way that they can be.
And how long do they normally stick around for? Is it forever or a certain a period of time?
I think it depends on why they're sticking around and how your grieving process goes. Ben stuck around. He was really more attached and more stuck in between worlds for about 1.5 years. And then we did a shamanic intervention that helped him to cross over. A friend helped me do that, a colleague. And then, but sometimes they'll be fully crossed over, and they come back and forth less and less, just because they're watching you and they see you're in a better place. They're watching the family, they're observing.
That's so beautiful. Right.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Wow. I hope that a lot of people listen to this, because this is so comforting and so beautiful. And that's why you wrote the book. Now, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the grieving part of it. So after you were able to talk to Ben 3 weeks after he died, because that was a short period, did you find that your grieving started to settle down? Because I know you're still grieving. 7 years into it, you're still grieving, but did the intensity settle?
Yeah, the intensity somewhat. I mean, I was on a long journey, of suffering and learning, because we tell ourselves so many stories. I had to learn how to not cause myself so much suffering and release the suffering. The pain is real. We don't release the pain, but we can release the stories that make us suffer so much. And so that took me a while. That's not such an easy lesson to learn when you're coming from me. I had no background in this. And so how can we deal with suffering? How can we deal with the stories? How can we transmute that energy, alchemize it, if you will, so that we can move in our grief.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were able to move in your grief. All right. So that was the perfect transition to shamanism. You said that shamanism allowed you to get into, to move through your grief and your healing journey. So tell us what that is. And I know from reading your book, you actually said that a minute ago too, that the medium that you went to suggested that you look into that. And I know you got on a plane and went off
yeah.
and went into that. Like, you were obviously open and susceptible to new experiences, right?
So that was about not even a year, maybe 9 months after he passed. I had been in the spiritual world and learning things and growing, and I had gone to an evolutionary astrologer who said, hey, I had another woman who had a reading like yours that became a shaman. And I'm like, a shaman? I thought that they were gone. I didn't know there was neo-shamanism. So I did what any left brain person would do. I went to Mr. Google, and Mr. Google said, try the 4 winds. So I contacted their office, and 3 weeks later, I'm on a plane to California, Joshua Tree, California. And thinking to myself, oh, these people aren't going to be anything like me. I'm not going to fit in. I'm going to be too old. I'm going to be too this. I'm going to be too that. And if it doesn't work out, I'll just go down the road to the spa and have a nice spa week, right? I don't know about all this. And I got there and I just loved it, and I loved the people. And so that was the beginning of the south direction of the medicine wheel. And the south direction of the medicine wheel is where you learn to shed your past, the way the serpent sheds its skin. So we're looking at all our old wounds and things that are bothering us and troubling us, old ways of thinking and being, all those things. And we're learning how to work with that, how to let it go by a process called illumination. So that's the first healing medicine that we learn in the south direction.
Okay. So they teach you how to shed your skin, and how do you guys do that? Do you do it by meditation? Do you do it by coaching? How do they do it?
Yeah, we do it. The shaman work is all working with the luminous energy field. And we know we have a luminous energy field because, when someone's alive and vibrant, it's up. And when someone's gone, it's just not there, right? So we have this field of energy around us. And so we do that. Shamans learn to do that. And by the way, shamanism is not a religious practice. So we have shamans that are priests and rabbis and, all sorts of people trained in using any energy medicine to help people. And so we do it by a process called illumination. And we have what we call medicine stones. And we use our stones to help people heal. The stones are things we blow into our own wounds, and we work with them in mandalas and different ways to energize those stones. And then other people can blow their wounds into the stones. And then we use a process where we allow them to breathe and breathe out. The breath is a metaphor for shamanic work. So we're breathing in newness and freshness, and we're breathing out staleness and old ways. And so we're allowing them to breathe and release and release and release with the medicine stone on one of their chakras. And then at the end of this process, we open our Viracocha. Viracocha is what, if you look at the pictures of the Christ and saints and the Buddha, they have this halo. We all have that. So we reach up into our halo and open it up. And then we bring this divine light down into the chakra, the person's chakra. So they've released heaviness and we're replacing it with divine light. And it's beautiful. Profoundly healing. Yeah, it's profoundly healing. So that's how shamans kind of work with wounds.
So interesting how you were directed into that. And I can now see why you said that, the yin and a yang, the death of your son.
Yeah.
And how that opened you up. And nobody wants to have the death of your son to be the doorway, but it turned out to be. So that's a beautiful thing, because I am pretty sure that this work, and obviously you decided to pack up as a judge. And I remember in your book, you're saying that they wouldn't even give you time off for your son's death.
Yeah, the corporate world is not very good at dealing with death and loss. And so I called in and they said, well, you can have 2 hours off for the funeral. Say, what?
I can't comprehend that at all.
I can't even comprehend it, so, and then it was a big kerfluffle, and then, okay, you can have some administrative leave. And then I ended up taking a couple days of vacation and, all that kind of stuff. But I went back far too early because I felt such pressure. Oh, but you have court appearances and you have decisions to write and you have this, and, it's going to be, how are we going to change this all around? And so I'm trying not to cry all day long while I'm trying to sit there. I went back far too soon because of the pressure. The pressure is really harsh for people.
It's also heartless too. So what I'm trying to say though is that allowed you to, I love the metaphor of shedding. You shed all that stuff and then you moved into the light, you shed all that skin or heaviness or whatever. So that was great. So I know there's four parts of the wheel. So you have the south, can you take us through the other three?
Yep. So the south, and then we move to the west, and the west has to do with death and dying and fear of death, right? Most of us are really, really afraid of death and dying. Ours and people that we love. And so we work with that. And sometimes we work with it. Sometimes people have energies and entities and dark, little bit dark energies that we learn to extract and take out in the West. And then in the North direction, we move to Hummingbird Medicine. So the West medicine is Jaguar medicine, Jaguar who fearlessly calls whatever is dead and dying in the jungle. And so we want to be like Jaguar, impeccable and culling whatever's dead and dying within us. And so then we move to Hummingbird medicine. And hummingbird, you think, oh my gosh, such a little bird. What could this hummingbird teach us? Stillness in motion. Its little wings are flapping and it's still, right?
And it's always singing, right?
And looking for food and looking for the sweetest nectar. Hummingbirds feast on nectar. They don't go to the dung heap. They don't go there. They go to the nectar of life, right? So that's that metaphor for drinking only from the sweetest nectar of life. So hummingbird medicine. And then we end up with eagle medicine. Eagle medicine, eagles fly high. So,
yes.
Eagles have been the standard for, the United States. So many, that flies high. It's the only bird that flies over all the storms of life, always looking for a clearing. And it has to do with destiny. So the East direction and eagle medicine has to do with finding your highest destiny, flying high, being able to fly high over obstacles.
That's beautiful. I love it. I actually I have an episode that when I learned about the eagles, and I have an episode that on the show talking about, what the eagle does, with storms, people always run from the storms, but the eagle loves the storms and it flies over the storm. So I love that. Yes.
Yeah. Looking for the clearing. And so we should all be like that. I'll see all the storms we get so stuck in. How can we, transcend that a little bit?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So somebody goes into the shaman training, and then do they become shamans after, or it's just like a course?
Yeah, it's a course, but they can choose. Maybe they just want to go through it for their own healing, and maybe they want to go through it to heal others. So I teach shamanism for the four winds. And so, I have students that do, some do one thing and some do the other.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. That's absolutely great. Okay. So now, including in shamanism, you talk about mindfulness tips, and you said that there are some mindfulness tips that can help us with grief and loss. Can you share those?
Sure. So what I talk about in my book is the journey of the bereaved, and the journey of the bereaved is through transition, resurrection, and rebirth. And that's the same process our loved ones go through. So their transition is from their physical form to their spiritual one. They resurrect on the other side. Whoa, here I am. Now what? And then after a while, they're either reborn, maybe recycled, reborn into a new life, or reborn into their afterlife. And so the bereaved, this is our special journey too, because we go through transformation too, from having this person to not having this person, right? And then after a while, if we can move some of this energy, we can have this opportunity to resurrect, to look around and say, okay, so now what? What next? And then finally to get to the rebirth part, where we actually use the energy of grief to create a new life out of the ashes of the old, which seems like a really unbelievable thing. But when you think about other big events in life, like parenthood and marriage, we know they have transformative energy. We know that life is never the same. Life is never going to, and with grief, or in our culture, we want to avoid it because we associate it with sadness and despair. And so people that are grieving are often told it's time to move on. It's time to get over it. Let's not talk about that. Right. Yeah. So oftentimes people become even more stuck in their grief because they become isolated and alone, and they know that we're making people uncomfortable. And so what I like people to know, if anybody has a takeaway, is that grief is a journey. It's not a one-time thing, and it has no time frame, and your journey is going to be different than anybody else's. And what not to say to somebody. Don't say, it's time to move on. It's time to just let them be, and allow them to go on this journey so that they can use these practices. So in the South direction, each direction has 4 practices associated with mindfulness, things that people have heard in other contexts. So We talk about non-judgment.
Mhm.
So one of the practice non-judgment, who are you judging and who's judging you? And what I ask people to do is to approach these practices in a very ceremonial way, to have, because we want to get out of our everyday reptilian brains,
Mhm.
fear, fighting, food, all that kind of stuff. We want to get to the neocortex, the brain of ceremony. And the
Mhm.
way we get to that higher brain is through ceremony. It's like walking into a church, walk
Mhm.
into a church or cathedral. And if you see candles, you just almost automatically go there and light a candle, right? So
Mhm.
we know fire is transformative. We know that the
Mhm.
sacred is transformative. So I ask people to sit in silence with a pipe, pan, and a candle and a matchbook and a piece of paper and pen, and write down, who are you judging? And
Mhm.
who's judging you? Sometimes it's our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles, people that we don't want to talk about, right? You want to say, you let me down, you weren't there, I'm mad at you. So this is a
Mhm.
way to deal with it in a spiritual way, to write it down with radical honesty. And we can write it down with radical honesty because we're going to burn it. So
Uh-huh.
nobody's going to see it.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to
Right.
find it. Nobody's going to get their feelings hurt. And
Right.
so we're going to take our everything, but maybe we're judging ourselves. I know I sure judge myself. Write it all down and then burn it in the fire with the intention of releasing it and allowing your heart to open to new ways of being. So that's, again, we're doing this. We're releasing and we're bringing in. We're releasing and we're bringing in. And then another practice in the South, this is how we become unstuck in the South. We're looking at non-suffering. So write down the stories. I should have done this. I could have done that. They didn't want to go to the doctor. I should have made them. All those shoulds,
Mhm.
right? I should have, could have,
Yeah.
would have. And,
Yeah.
and all these stories we tell ourselves are really not true, and they're really not real because we didn't have the control that we want to pretend that we have in hindsight.
Right.
That we could have
Right.
made our loved one do this or made them not do
Yeah.
that or not go to the party or go to the doctor. We don't really have that control. And so we're beating ourselves up really about things that we had no control over. So taking that to the fire too, writing down all those stories is so cathartic for people, right? It's like you don't even realize what you're carrying, what baggage you're carrying, and you're telling yourself, and burning those too. Non-attachment. Sometimes we really get attached. I became attached to the role of grieving mother, become attached to widower, and it's so heavy. These roles are so heavy, we almost can't carry them. We almost are slumping over. You see people slumping in their grief, they're carrying this heaviness. And so even those sort of things, taking those roles to the fire and allowing them to go. And then at the end of that first direction, then we talk about beauty, the practice of beauty. So many times if we're caretaking somebody who's been ill for a long time, we have a child that's in addiction, we have someone in COVID suffering for a while, we forget totally about the practice of beauty. What brings us beauty? And sometimes I like to have people write practice beauty on their refrigerator on a piece of paper and stick it on the refrigerator. What is one thing that you can do today that you love, that brings you happiness and joy? Just one thing, a flower, watch a show, whatever, one thing that just brings you, go to a movie, go to an art show, whatever. And just begin every day to do one thing, and it builds on itself. So we want to dig neural networks. Our brains are amazing things. So neuroscience tells us when we ruminate and we think the same dark and dismal thoughts, we're digging these neural networks deeper and deeper to the point we feel like we can't get out. So practicing beauty, we're beginning to dig new neural networks. We're getting back in touch with joy and happiness and love, instead of just staying in our those networks, those places of the holes that we've been digging for ourselves in our grief. and which our society teaches us is the way to go, right? There's really no win in grieving. So if you don't grieve long enough, boy, she sure didn't seem to care very much, didn't affect her. And if you grieve too long, oh, she needs some medication, right? She's really in bad shape. So you might as well grieve in your own way and do it the way that feels right to you, because you're not going to get everybody signing up and saying, boy, that was the perfect way to grieve. There's none of that, so a lot of judgment with it.
Well, that was great. Yeah, a couple of circlebacks there. Yeah, I mean, there's this saying that time heals all wounds, and society always thinks that, okay, it's been some time now, you need to move on or whatever. And even if they don't physically say it, they're thinking it. And as spiritual beings, we can pick it up, we can perceive what they're saying. But in my life, I've been fortunate, to be in my 60s, and I've only lost my grandmother, and she was 80 something years old, and there was not too much heavy grieving there. But I have learned about grief from people that are around me. For instance, my daughter was engaged to a young man, and he committed suicide, and he was the same age as your son, around 27 or so, just before his 28th birthday, and she grieved, and I had to watch her. And then I've spoken to a lot of women that have lost their husbands, and one of the things I've learned from that group is that grief never really ends. It is not as intense as it was. The intensity or the times between, one woman talked a bit about a wave that's knocking you over. She's saying that the wave still knocks you over 5 years into it, but it doesn't come as frequent. There was a time when you couldn't get your head above the water, and it was knocking you down. As soon as you get up, it will knock you down again. So I understand that, and I've understand. So now when I'm talking to somebody that's grieving, I don't expect them to have like an end date. I'm just thinking that, the space between when they feel really bad is getting wider and wider. Is that how you would categorize it as far as grief?
Yeah, I think there's some wisdom in that. And I think, however, that some people really get stuck in their grief and they can't find their way out. And they, make their loved one's room into a shrine, or they stay in their house, and they really become consumed with it. And so
I've heard about that shrine thing. Nothing changed.
Nothing.
And they go in there all the time, and go ahead.
Yeah. And so I think sometimes they need a little bit of help. And so my book, many books that deal with grief and loss talk about, okay, here's your first step. Now you're gonna go and have a date, or you're gonna do this, or you're gonna go to a party, or you're gonna do that. And people are like, I can't. So my book is almost like a spiritual prequel, of cleansing, if you will. Let's cleanse out the heaviness. Let's cleanse out. Let's talk about regeneration and rebirth. And one of the practices is called Indigenous Alchemy. And I love that term because I had to look it up. I'm like, I love words. And I'm like, Indigenous Alchemy. I want some of that, I think.
I just finished reading the book, The Alchemist, and it was one of the most powerful books. So when I hear about alchemy, I know exactly what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, so it's Indigenous Alchemy means native or inherent desire for transformation. And I think we as humans are really hardwired for transformation and change. And when we keep ourselves stuck in grief, that energy stays stuck in our body, and it can make us sick. Years later, we can come up with big illnesses because we have so much unresolved grief. So what I like to suggest for people is to really work with these practices. Each one, there's 16. And so if you really deeply do the work and take it to spirit and take it to a candle and write everything down and have this big intention is so powerful to release. There can be profound change that will enable you then to go to a party, have fun, maybe go on a date or whatever it is, but almost like we have to do a little spiritual work first.
Yeah. Yeah. We all have to do the work. Yeah. Spiritual work is very, very important in everything, whether it's, transforming the energy of grief, whether it's, the law of attraction that you're trying to attract or whatever. Yes, you've got to do the work. And whether it's a relationship that, that you're at odds with someone and their energy is always conflicting. Yes, anything that you need to move forward with, that you need to do energy work, because energy is very important. So that's awesome. So yeah, you talked about your book a minute ago. So let's get deeper into the book. So the book is called Living Grieving, Using Energy Medicine to Alchemize Grief and Loss. So, for those of you watching on video, this is what it looks like. So yeah, so tell us about the book. Why did you write it? I know you wanted to share, the story of your son, but I think that you have, like you said, you wanted to help people transform their grief, using it as alchemy. So tell us why you wrote it, and, tell people where they can find your website and your courses, and obviously they know they can get your book on Amazon, but yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So I wrote it. I mean, I ended up, after I went on sort of beginning my spiritual journey and beginning shamanism, I ended up selling my home and all my possessions. And I went on a 2.5-year trip around the world trying to understand grief and loss. It just seems so incomprehensible to me. It's like this big elephant, and how do you deal with this? And so I really thought in the beginning I would just be writing a blog or something, and it turned into a book. And I feel like the book was downloaded, just like the journey of the bereaved, transition, resurrection, rebirth, and how we can get there. And then all the steps, these beautiful practices that Alberto Villoldo so brilliantly associates with the medicine wheel, and that allow people to use these practices to transform. So that was my idea as it went along. I thought, oh my God, I want to touch people. I want to help people. I want to show people a way to live with their grief, because we don't get over it. It's why I called it living grieving. We're living with every day. We're transformed. We're changed. Our world has shifted. And so how can we make something out of this, something better? How can we create a new life out of the ashes of the old by honoring our loved ones? A lot of people say, if I create a new life, my loved one will think I don't love them, or that I didn't care about them, or right. We have these notions. But what if this is honoring our loved ones, our transformation? So you can find me at KarenJohnson.net. And you can find the book Living Grieving on Amazon. I do shamanic work. I help people with death and dying, people that are in the process of dying, or people that have passed on, or widows, the survivors. I call us the survivors. And the book is really written for the survivors. How can we, the survivors, continue on?
Yeah.
And I have a class coming up. It'll probably start the end of April, and it's a 5-week class, and we go through the book direction by direction in community, which is so nice to see other people and be with other people who are experiencing loss and grief, and who are going through all these practices. Each week we do 4 practices individually, and then we get on Zoom and talk about it. It's profoundly healing for people.
Yeah.
So sign into my website. You can find out about my class and all that.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. KarenJohnson.net. Right. I've got it. So, and what's your social media handles? How can they follow you?
Okay. So on Facebook, Karen Johnson Healing, and Instagram, same thing, Karen Johnson Healing. Yeah. And I also have YouTube. You can look me up on YouTube. I have lots of videos on shamanic journeying and things like that.
Okay. So that's awesome. Well, yes, you didn't disappoint. We spend a lot of our talk on transitioning from life to death. Using your your experiences with your son as a focal point. And reading your book, I know how deeply you loved your son and how deeply your trauma was. And to see you so peaceful, and to see you so, you've transformed that energy. It is good for, anybody that's in this space to know that this is possible. It's possible if you do the work, whether it's, taking your class on shamanism, or, even reading your book, that's a very inexpensive way
It's
to
a little
start
different
the
perspective on
journey.
grieving. So you can maybe
Right.
look at it in a slightly different way. And people find that to be very helpful too. So they're not stuck in old notions of how grief is supposed to look or feel. Can maybe, just change it a little bit so we can
Yeah.
begin to see the light.
And what's also powerful is because you talked about, and I know from reading your book that you went through that too. What could you have done differently? Who was at fault? I know in your son's case, you could have blamed a lot of people. You could have blamed the person that sold it to him. You said, you blamed you for, because I know when you were thinking of going on a trip, you had to convince yourself to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and like I said, I have the experience with my daughter and the suicide, and I will tell you that she went into that what if stuff for a long time.
Yeah.
They had a fight and he decided to commit suicide, and she was thinking that if she didn't say this or she didn't do this, and the mother was saying, if she did this and whatever, and that made their recovery so much longer.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, if you can get
yes.
out of, the blaming or what ifs,
Yeah.
that is powerful right there. Judgment, you call it. Right.
Yeah. Shame, blame, guilt, that trifecta that
Yeah.
gets us. And we're very good as humans as finding all our faults.
Yeah.
But now
Well,
we have to practice
what you
release.
didn't do, I don't think you can ever actually escape that, because you will, yeah. I think that in any time that someone dies, and you're always thinking of something that you could have done to save them.
For sure. For
I think
sure.
it's a natural thing. Sorry?
Yeah, it is. And that's why we have to take it to spirit. We have to take it to God and ask for transformation and allow our hearts to change and to open to other ways. Because otherwise, we can get very stuck in our grief and not be able to find a way out and find ourselves. I know one man didn't tell anybody about his son's death for 16 years, and 16 years later, he fell apart. So, you can grieve early, you can work with it early, you can work with it later, but you have to work with it. Because we have this innate desire for transformation, and trying to keep ourselves stuck and keep it all down is just a way to make ourselves sick.
Yeah, so I love that. I did the fire thing myself, where you would write something down and burn it. Yeah, and it's, the reason that I did mine, they're saying, if you want to say something to someone, you download it, and you don't really have to give it to them, but once you download it, it's off of your mind. So it's a good healing journey. So,
Absolutely. And sometimes we're surprised by how many things we're carrying around when we start writing it down. Oh yeah, this story, that story, this person, that person. And think about all that kind of rattling around, all that heavy negative stuff. And when we can release it, it can present profound healing. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. So yeah, it's almost the same. They're saying that write letters and don't mail it, but yeah, downloading is very, very important, right? Okay, well, all right, Karen, so thank you very much. You did not disappoint. I loved our conversation. I love the fact that you has transitioned yourself. I love the fact that you your experience with your son, Ben, regardless, it was painful, but I'm actually just coming, right now to the realization that pain serves its purpose,
Yes. Yep. There's
Pain-
always the blessing and the curse, it's always
Yes.
that. There's not one without the other.
Yes, exactly. The pain served its purpose, and your pain transformed you. And, I can see it. And, for you listeners that are listening, I'm hoping that you can use Karen as your model that, pain can be transformed, and you can find your purpose and destiny, like the eagle, the storm, love the storm and fly over the storm. So that's beautiful. So Karen, if you guys head over to her website, karenjohnson.net, you will find all the things that that Karen offers. And as far as shamanism, I will have a transcript of my conversation with Karen on the show page, which is blog.myhelps.us. And I know this is one of the ones that you're definitely going to want to listen to again, and probably read some of the steps and things that you missed on the audio. And I would also have links to her website and links to her book. So if you missed that as well, that you can get it there. I want to thank you, Karen, for coming on the show. Like
Thank you for having me.
I couldn't.
It's been fun. Yeah.
It was fun. Yes, and you expanded my mind on life after death. I love these conversations because I learned so much, and I'm like an eternal student. I want to learn something new every day.
Me too. Me too.
All right. So as we wrap up, any last words?
Nope. The one thing I would leave people with is remember, your grief is a journey, and you have your own journey, and don't let anybody talk you out of it. And once you see it as a journey, then you just think, hey, I have a lot of steps on this journey. I don't have to do it all today.
Right. That's true. It's a journey, and grief is only one step in that journey, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and it was preordained. Right. All right.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Thank you guys for tuning in to Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life. I hope that your mind was transformed today on my conversation with Karen. So thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, namaste.